I always believed that betrayal is something you hear about in other people's stories, whispered in hushed tones at tea parties or written in novels where the heroine is too naive to see it coming. I never thought betrayal would become the blood that pumped through my veins, the very thing that defined my existence. But then again, perhaps all betrayals feel that way. Too personal, too devastating, too tailored to the precise shape of your heart, like a blade crafted solely to pierce you. And the worst part? My betrayer wasn't a stranger. She wasn't a distant acquaintance. She wasn't even just a friend. She was my sister. My own flesh and blood. My younger sister. From the very beginning, I was the one who held her hand when she was too scared to walk into the classroom. I was the one who gave up my slice of cake when she cried because hers had fallen on the floor. I was the one who stayed up all night when she had a fever, cooling her forehead with damp cloths while our parents slept peacefully, knowing I would take care of it. My name is Amara, and hers is Lena. I am 5 years older than her, though sometimes it felt like the gap was wider, like I was her second mother, her shield, her constant protector. She would cling to me at family gatherings, her small fingers locking around mine, as though I were her anchor in a stormy sea. "Don't leave me," she would whisper, and I never did. I never left her. Not once. That's the irony of it all. I never left her until she left me. We grew up in a modest house, the kind that always smelled faintly of cardamom and old wooden furniture. Our parents were good people, hardworking, but they didn't have much time for emotional tenderness. It wasn't neglect, not exactly, but it was clear from an early age that if Lena needed comfort, she came to me, not to them. She was beautiful even as a child. Wide, curious eyes that could charm anyone, dimples that appeared like tiny secrets on her cheeks whenever she smiled. Teachers adored her. Relatives spoiled her. Boys, later on, would hover around her like moths drawn to a flame. I, on the other hand, was plainer. Not ugly, at least that's what I told myself, but quieter, sharper around the edges. I had ambition instead of charm, determination instead of sweetness. People respected me, but they loved her. And that was fine. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. Because no matter how much the world adored her, she always returned to me. She needed me. She sought me out in crowded rooms, in lonely nights, in moments of triumph and despair. And I, foolishly, blindly, believed that this bond was unbreakable. The betrayal didn't happen overnight. Looking back now, I can trace its beginnings like cracks in a wall, small fractures spreading silently until the entire structure crumbled. It began with a man. Isn't that how these stories always begin? His name was Adrian. He walked into my life like a storm disguised as sunlight. He was not the handsomest man I had ever seen, but he carried himself with an ease that made you notice him. There was a steadiness in his eyes, the kind that makes you feel seen, truly seen, as though no one else in the room mattered. I met him at work. I was already climbing the ladder in my career, proud of the respect I had earned in a world that rarely handed anything to women easily. Adrian was a consultant brought in for a short project. We started as colleagues, then became friends, and then slowly, inevitably, more than friends. For the first time in my life, I felt chosen. Not because I was the responsible older sister, not because I was reliable or useful, but because I was me. He made me laugh, he listened to my fears, he spoke about the future, as though I belonged in his. I began to imagine a life with him, marriage, children, a home where love wasn't rationed like it had been in ours. And like always, I shared everything with Lena. She was thrilled at first. Or, at least, she pretended to be. She would tease me, asking when she'd get to meet him, when she'd finally get to see her usually composed sister blush like a schoolgirl. When I finally introduced them, I was nervous. Silly, really. Why should I have been? She was my sister after all. The three of us went out for dinner. I watched them interact, saw the way Adrian smiled at her, the way she laughed at his jokes. She was always charming, always magnetic. But I told myself I was imagining the spark between them, that it was just her way. Lena was friendly with everyone after all. I ignored the first crack. Over the following months, subtle things began to shift. Adrian grew quieter around me, distracted. Sometimes, when my phone lit up, I would see Lena's name more often than I expected. At first, it made sense. They liked each other, and surely it was normal for them to talk. She was my sister. He was my partner. Two important pieces of my life. Of course, they would overlap. But then came the late-night texts, the unexplained absences, the excuses that never quite added up. I confronted Adrian once. I still remember the way he looked at me, almost wounded, as though my suspicion was an insult. "You're imagining things, Amara," he said, his voice calm, steady. "Lena is like a sister to me. Do you really think I would betray you like that?" And I wanted so badly to believe him.
So I did.
I ignored the second crack. The truth revealed itself not in some dramatic explosion, but in the quietest, cruelest of ways. One evening, I came home earlier than expected. The house was too quiet, except for the faint sound of laughter drifting from the living room. My footsteps were soft as I approached, my heart already thundering in my chest, though I didn't know why. And then I saw them. Adrian, sitting on the couch, his arm draped casually around her shoulders. Lena, leaning into him, her head tilted back in laughter, her hand resting on his thigh like it belonged there. They didn't notice me at first. For a split second, I stood there, invisible in my own home, watching the two people I loved most in the world share a moment that shattered me. When they finally saw me, the laughter died. Lena's smile faltered, Adrian's arms slipped away from her shoulders, and silence filled the room like smoke. I wish I could tell you I screamed, that I raged, that I demanded answers. But I didn't. I just stood there, frozen, my world collapsing around me. "Amara," Lena whispered, her eyes wide, guilty. But guilt meant nothing. Guilt couldn't undo the betrayal. That was the moment, the precise, unalterable moment, when something inside me broke. The days that followed were a blur of numbness and pain. Adrian tried to explain, to twist the narrative into something less damning. "It wasn't serious," he said. "It was a mistake. I love you, not her." But his words were ash in my mouth. Lena, on the other hand, avoided me. She disappeared for hours, sometimes days, leaving me alone with my grief. When she finally faced me, she cried. She begged for forgiveness. She said she hadn't meant for it to happen, that she didn't know why she did it. But betrayal is never an accident. It is always a choice. I remember staring at her tear-streaked face, feeling nothing but a cold emptiness. She had been my shadow, my confidant, my responsibility, and she had stolen from me the one thing I allowed myself to truly want. That was when the numbness began to shift. Slowly, quietly, like embers sparking in the ashes of a burned-down house. Anger. I don't know when anger turned into something darker. When anger evolved into the sharp, precise edge of revenge. Maybe it was the way people looked at me, pity in their eyes, whispering behind my back about the sister who betrayed me. Maybe it was the smug confidence in Adrian's face when he thought I was too broken to fight back. Or maybe it was simply the realization that I had given my entire life to protecting Lena, only for her to stab me in the back the first chance she got. Whatever it was, I woke up one morning and knew this story would not end with me as the victim.
No.
This story would end with me reclaiming every shred of power they had stolen. They thought they had destroyed me, but they had only awakened something I didn't know I was capable of. And as I stood before the mirror, staring at my reflection with eyes that no longer belonged to the same naive woman who once believed in unbreakable bonds, I whispered the promise that would guide me from that day forward. They will pay. Grief changes its shape over time. At first, it was a knife lodged in my chest, sharp and merciless, every breath a reminder of its presence. Later, it became a dull ache, heavy and suffocating, pressing on me even in my sleep. But anger is different. Anger is alive. It breathes with you, it sharpens your senses, it whispers to you in the dead of night when everything else is quiet. I woke each morning to the same thought. I cannot let this go. I cannot be the woman who is pitted, who is whispered about as the tragic sister abandoned for the prettier, younger one. I cannot allow them to walk away, hand in hand, while I am left behind in pieces. I had lived my entire life for others, my parents, my colleagues, my sister. But betrayal has a way of stripping you down until only the rawest parts of you remain. For the first time in my life, I began to think only of myself, of what I wanted, of what I deserved. And what I wanted was not forgiveness. It was not healing. It was justice, measured not by the law, but by my own hand. Lena still lived in the house for a while after the truth came out. The air between us was poisoned, thick with words unsaid. She tiptoed around me, as though afraid of shattering whatever fragile civility remained. Sometimes she would try to speak, to explain again, but I no longer heard her. Her words fell flat, meaningless. I studied her instead. The way her hands shook when she poured tea, the way her eyes darted to me in search of mercy, the way she lingered near the door, as though ready to flee at the slightest provocation. It was strange, observing her like that. For years, I had known her every habit, every expression. But now I looked at her not as my sister, but as something else entirely, an enemy who thought she could still wear the mask of family. Adrian came less often. He had the gall to act embarrassed, as though avoiding me could erase the guilt from his conscience. But I knew he still saw her. I knew from the way her phone lit up late at night, from the faint smile she tried to hide when she thought I wasn't watching. She thought she was clever, thought that just because I no longer confronted her, I had accepted it. She thought silence meant surrender. But silence is not surrender. Silence is strategy. The first step of revenge is patience. That was what I told myself as I endured their stolen glances and hidden conversations. Patience. Let them grow comfortable again. Let them believe the storm has passed. Let them believe I am broken, harmless. A woman scorned is dangerous, yes, but a woman scorned who pretends to be defeated, that is lethal. I began to watch more closely. I noted the times she left the house, where she went, how long she stayed. I noticed the way Adrian's car would sometimes be parked 3 streets over instead of in front of our home. They thought they were careful. They weren't careful enough. At work, people assumed I was recovering. They said I looked tired, thinner, but stronger. They told me I was handling things with dignity. I smiled, thanked them, played the part of the wounded woman who was learning to move on. In truth, I was sharpening myself into a weapon. Every kind word, every sympathetic look, they only fueled me further. They reminded me that the world saw me as the victim, and I could not allow that image to remain. Late at night, when the house was quiet, I would sit by the window with a notebook. I wrote everything down. Dates, times, conversations. Patterns began to emerge. I didn't know yet exactly how I would destroy them, but I knew that information was power, and I was gathering plenty. Lena caught me writing once. She came into the room unexpectedly, her eyes red from crying, her hair tangled as though she hadn't slept. She looked at the notebook on my lap and asked, "What are you doing?" I looked up at her and smiled. The kind of smile that carries no warmth. "Just writing," I said. Her lips trembled as though she wanted to ask more, but she didn't. She turned and left the room. That was another thing betrayal does. It steals courage from the betrayer. She was afraid of me now. Not of what I might say, but of what I might do. Weeks turned into months. The silence between us grew heavier until one day she finally moved out. She left most of her things behind, as though she couldn't bear to pack the memories.
She didn't say goodbye.
Just a note on the kitchen table. "I'm sorry. I need to figure out who I am." I laughed when I read it. She needed to figure out who she was? She had already figured out. She was a thief of trust, a destroyer of family. She was exactly who she wanted to be, and she didn't need to pretend otherwise. After she left, the house felt emptier but calmer. I could breathe again without the constant presence of her guilt filling the air. And yet, her absence did not ease the weight in my chest. Because revenge cannot be carried out on memories. Revenge requires presence. I saw her again 2 months later. She was with Adrian, of course. They walked into a cafe together, her hand tucked neatly into the crook of his arm, their heads bent close in conversation. I had gone there alone, intending only to clear my mind. But when I saw them, it felt like the universe had placed them there deliberately, daring me to act. They didn't see me. I sat in the corner, my coffee untouched, my gaze fixed on them. Watching them laugh, whisper, touch, it should have broken me all over again. But it didn't. Instead, it ignited something. A calm, cold determination. For the first time, I realized something vital. I didn't want to ruin them in one blow. That would be too merciful. No, what I wanted was for them to feel the slow unraveling of their lives, the same way I had. I wanted them to look at each other one day and see nothing but the ashes of what they thought was love. I left the cafe without a word. They never noticed me, but I noticed everything. That night, I took out my notebook and began to draft ideas. Not plans yet, but possibilities. Little ways their lives could be fractured. Secrets revealed. Trust eroded. Opportunities stolen. Revenge, I realized, was not a single act. It was a series of precise cuts, each one deeper than the last, until the target bleeds out from 1,000 wounds. And so, I began to prepare myself for the long game. The first part of my transformation was external. People underestimate appearances, but they're a weapon. I started dressing differently, sharper, bolder, in colors that demanded attention. I joined new social circles, made new connections. I laughed when people expected me to cry. I thrived when they assumed I would crumble. And slowly, people stopped looking at me with pity. They began to look at me with curiosity, even admiration. Lena, on the other hand, was shrinking. I heard things, rumors from mutual friends, whispers that she wasn't doing well at her new job, that she seemed distracted, anxious. Adrian, too, seemed restless. He had left the consulting firm, taken a less impressive position. Perhaps it was coincidence, or perhaps life was already starting to chip away at them. But I wanted more than coincidence. I wanted intention. I wasn't ready to act yet, but I knew the time was coming. The thought of it sustained me, kept me alive in a way that grief never could. Every betrayal births a new version of the betrayed. And the woman I was becoming was not one who forgave. She was one who waited, watched, and struck when the moment was right. And the moment was approaching. I could feel it, like a storm gathering on the horizon. People think revenge is loud. They imagine shouting matches, broken glass, dramatic confrontations in public places. But the truth is, revenge whispers before it screams. It slips quietly into the cracks of everyday life, like water seeping into stone, freezing, expanding, until the structure collapses without warning. I had no interest in the obvious. A single blow might have satisfied a weaker person, but not me. My revenge had to be careful, layered, slow. I wanted them to crumble under the weight of uncertainty before they even knew I had lifted a hand against them. The first step was invisibility. To strike effectively, I needed them to forget I existed as a threat. Lena had always known me as the protective sister, the one who forgave, who endured, who carried responsibility on her shoulders like a second skin. She believed, deep down, that no matter what she did, I would never truly hurt her. Adrian, too, assumed that my silence was weakness. That suited me perfectly. I didn't reach out to them. I didn't mention their names. When mutual friends asked how I was doing, I smiled, said I was thriving, and changed the subject. Soon I noticed a shift. They began asking about me instead. Small questions slipped through. Is Amara okay? She seems different, doesn't she? I let the curiosity grow. Curiosity becomes rumor, and rumor is the first seed of unease. Lena called once. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail, her voice tight, hesitant. I hope you're all right. I know you probably hate me, but you're still my sister. I replayed it 3 times, studying the tremor in her tone. She was nervous.
Good.
Let her be. I began planting shadows in their lives. It started with simple things. Adrian received an anonymous email at work. Nothing incriminating, just a vague line. She knows. I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. He would assume the worst. Who was she? What did she know? I imagined him reading it, feeling the ground shift beneath his feet. For Lena, it was different. She was more emotional, more vulnerable. I slipped a note under her apartment door one evening. Do you trust him? Just 4 words. No signature. No explanation. The kind of question that lingers long after the paper is thrown away. Neither of them ever confronted me. That was the beauty of it. They couldn't be sure it was me. It could have been anyone. A jealous colleague of Adrian's. A neighbor who disapproved of their relationship. An old friend who pitied me. Suspicion multiplies faster than certainty ever could. When I saw them together in public, I kept my distance but made sure to be noticed. A glance too long from across the street, a fleeting glimpse of me leaving just as they arrived somewhere. Each sighting was brief enough to be dismissed, but frequent enough to unsettle them. Presence, without confrontation. That was my weapon. I started hearing whispers through mutual acquaintances. That Lena had been asking if anyone had seen me. That Adrian seemed stressed at work, distracted. That they sometimes argued in public, hushed but tense. I savored every detail. Their relationship was supposed to be their prize, their triumph over me. But instead, it was already cracking. Still, I knew cracks weren't enough. I needed them to question not only each other but themselves. So, I turned my attention to their trust. I created a new email account under a false name and sent Adrian a message, pretending to be someone who had seen Lena with another man. Thought you should know. She didn't look like she was yours. I imagined his expression, the tightening of his jaw, the seed of doubt planting itself. For Lena, I used the opposite tactic. A text from an untraceable number. He's still seeing her. I didn't clarify who her was. I didn't need to. Her mind would do the rest. I never stayed close enough to see the fallout, but I could feel it in the air. People carry tension like a scent, and soon, it drifted back to me through the smallest channels. Their perfect little bond was faltering, and I hadn't even touched them yet. At night, when I lay in bed, I would imagine them. Adrian staring at his phone, wondering who had seen Lena. Lena staring at hers, wondering if Adrian still thought of me. Both of them circling suspicion like vultures over a carcass, unaware that I was the one leading them there. The beauty of revenge is in patience. Each move was small, subtle, almost invisible. But the impact was undeniable. I was unraveling them not with fire but with smoke, not with a scream but with a whisper. And yet, there were moments when doubt crept into me, uninvited. Moments when I asked myself if I was becoming something unrecognizable. I would see my reflection in the mirror and hardly recognize the calm, cold woman staring back. But then I would remember the couch, the laughter, the hand on his thigh, and the doubt would vanish, replaced by resolve. I wasn't destroying innocence. They had already destroyed that themselves. I was simply ensuring they felt the weight of what they had done. The suspense was the sweetest part. They didn't know when or how or even if. They only knew something was coming. And I intended to keep it that way.
For now.
Revenge isn't about speed. It's about rhythm. A too quick strike is noticed, remembered, defended against. But the steady beat of unease, repeated over time, lodges itself deeper than any single blow. By the time your enemies realize what's happening, they're already bleeding out. I could see it happening to them. I didn't need to be in their apartment to know it. I could hear it in the way their voices carried when I passed by on the street. Lena's sharp tone cutting through the evening air, Adrian's clipped responses, both of them trying to hush themselves when they noticed a neighbor nearby. Once I even paused outside listening. Then, who is she texting you, Adrian? No one. For God's sake, Lena, are you really doing this again? Don't lie to me. I can tell when you're lying. I smiled to myself, standing in the shadows. They were already giving me exactly what I wanted. Suspicion, accusations, fractures. I didn't need to lift a hand. Just a nudge here, a whisper there, and their foundation was crumbling. The beauty of it was that they couldn't be sure of anything. When Adrian got the anonymous email hinting that Lena wasn't faithful, It was only words on a screen. When Lena received the text saying Adrian was still seeing her, it was only pixels on her phone. Neither of them had proof. But proof doesn't matter when trust is already fragile. Doubt is louder than evidence. I became a ghost in their lives, appearing just enough to unsettle. A glance at Adrian across a crowded store before slipping away. A faint perfume of mine that lingered where Lena didn't expect it. I left a book she once borrowed from me on a cafe table where she liked to sit, knowing she would notice, knowing she would feel watched. Each time, I never stayed long enough to be caught. It was important they wondered if they had imagined it. That's the cruelest kind of haunting, the one you can't prove to anyone else. Word reached me through a friend who still spoke to Lena occasionally. She said my sister looked tired, thinner, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. She said Adrian seemed on edge, snapping at small things. They weren't unraveling in silence anymore. People had begun to notice. And yet, they clung to each other. That's what struck me most. Even as doubt gnawed at them, even as suspicion ate away at their bond, they held on. Perhaps it was guilt. Perhaps it was pride. Perhaps it was fear of admitting to the world that the love they had chosen, the love they betrayed me for, was already rotting. That made my work easier. The tighter they clung, the more suffocating it became. I decided to test just how deep the cracks went. One night, I left a note on their car windshield. Just a single line, scrawled in careful handwriting that wasn't quite my own. Do you trust each other? I watched from across the street as they found it. Lena picked it up first, her eyes scanning the words. She looked around quickly, nervously, then shoved the paper into her bag. Adrian said something I couldn't hear. She shook her head. They argued quietly right there beside the car before finally driving off. The next day, another friend mentioned to me in passing that she'd seen Lena alone, pacing outside a cafe, phone in hand, eyes red as though she had been crying. Adrian hadn't shown up. I pretended not to care, but inside I felt a dark satisfaction bloom. Their love had once been my wound. Now, it was their battlefield. Sometimes, late at night, I would imagine them lying awake in the same bed but facing opposite directions. Lena wondering if Adrian still thought of me. Adrian wondering if Lena was looking for someone else. Both of them wondering who had left the note, who had sent the messages, who was watching them. The silence between them must have been louder than any argument. But I didn't want them to break just yet. Not completely. No. I wanted them to live in the uncertainty, to drown in it slowly. A sudden end would be mercy. I was not ready to be merciful. So I kept my distance, but never too far. A glimpse of me at the grocery store, leaving before they could approach. A mutual acquaintance mentioning casually that I seemed better than ever. A post on social media where I looked radiant, happy, thriving. I knew Lena saw them. I knew Adrian heard about me. I wanted them to wonder how I could heal while they withered. And the truth? I wasn't healed. Not at all. But revenge has a way of replacing grief. It gives pain a purpose. The suspense was working. They were unraveling themselves. All I had to do was wait. Revenge is a dish best served cold, they say. But no one tells you how long you must keep it frozen, how much discipline it takes not to consume it too early. I had been patient. I had let suspicion and paranoia devour Lena and Adrian from within. I had made them doubt each other, themselves, the very love they had chosen over loyalty. But patience has its limit. And tonight mine ended. It began with an invitation. Lena and Adrian's wedding anniversary was approaching, their third. The irony did not escape me. 3 years of marriage, 3 years since my world had collapsed, 3 years since my sister chose my lover and betrayed me with a smile. I decided their anniversary would be the day I reclaimed everything they had stolen. The plan had been building in my mind for months, brick by brick, detail by detail. They had no idea, of course. They were too busy tearing at each other's throats, too busy trying to patch a sinking boat. When the invitation arrived, a delicate white envelope with gold lettering, hand-delivered to their apartment, they must have thought it was from a friend or a relative. Inside, a card. Celebrate your love. A private evening awaits you.
Trust me.
You'll never forget it. No name, no signature. Only a location, only a time. I knew Lena would argue with Adrian about it. I knew Adrian would dismiss it as nonsense. But curiosity is a stronger force than fear. And their curiosity about each other's secrets, about who might be watching, about what truths remained hidden, that was irresistible. They arrived at the place I had chosen, an abandoned country house just outside the city. It was once a grand estate, now reduced to crumbling walls and ivy-covered windows. I waited in the shadows as they pulled up, their car headlights slicing through the night. Lena stepped out first, clutching her coat tighter around her, looking nervously at the house. Adrian followed, muttering something I couldn't hear, his shoulders tense. They hesitated at the door, but when they found it unlocked, they went in. Inside, I had prepared everything. The dusty furniture had been cleared, the grand hall lit by dozens of candles. On a long wooden table sat 2 glasses of wine, waiting. And at the far end, a screen and projector already set. I stayed hidden as they entered, watching their faces shift from confusion to unease. "What is this?" Lena whispered. "I don't know," Adrian muttered. "Some kind of sick joke?" But curiosity pulled them forward. They sat, hesitant, as the projector flickered to life. And there, on the screen, came the first image, a photo of me and Adrian, taken years ago, when we were still together. We were smiling, his arm around me, my head on his shoulder. Happiness frozen in time. Lena gasped. Adrian stiffened. The slideshow continued. Picture after picture, memory after memory. The 2 of us in cafes, at the beach, in my apartment. Our love story, replayed before their eyes. Each image another knife twisted in their fragile bond. "Why are we seeing this?" Lena demanded, her voice shaking. Adrian said nothing. His jaw tightened, his fists clenched. Then the screen went black. For a moment, only the flicker of candlelight filled the silence. Then my voice filled the room. "You took everything from me." Lena spun around. Adrian stood up, searching the shadows. "I gave you my trust, my loyalty, my heart," my voice continued. "And you, my own sister. You smiled as you stole what was mine. And you, Adrian, you swore you loved me. But love meant nothing when temptation came knocking." Finally, I stepped out from the darkness. My heels clicked against the wooden floor, my face lit by the candlelight. Their eyes widened. "Amara," Lena whispered, her voice trembling. "Hello, little sister," I said softly. "Happy anniversary." Neither of them spoke. They looked at each other, then back at me, fear written across their faces. I walked toward the table, my movements calm, deliberate. "You've wondered for months, haven't you?" I said. "Who's been watching you? Who's been whispering doubts into your ears? Who's been tearing at your trust?" It was me. Every message, every shadow, every note.
Me.
"Why?" Adrian burst out, though his voice betrayed his guilt. "Why?" I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Because you deserve to feel what I felt. To live in the ruins you built for me. Because betrayal demands payment, and tonight I collect." I gestured toward the wine glasses. "Drink." Lena shook her head. "No." "Drink," I repeated, my voice sharp as a blade. They hesitated. Adrian reached for his glass first, perhaps out of pride, perhaps out of defiance. Lena followed reluctantly. They sipped, their eyes never leaving mine. The silence stretched. I could almost hear their hearts beating, fast, uneven. Then Adrian coughed. A sharp, sudden sound. He set the glass down, his face tightening. Lena gasped, clutching her stomach. Panic spread across their features. "You," Adrian choked out. "Yes," I said simply.
Poison.
Slow, but certain. Lena stumbled toward me, her hands shaking. "Amara, please, please don't." I stepped back. "You didn't beg when you took him from me. You didn't plead when you laughed behind my back. Why should I grant you mercy?" Tears filled her eyes. She reached out, as if to touch me, but I moved away. I wanted to see the moment of realization, the moment they understood this was their end. Adrian collapsed to his knees, coughing violently. Lena sank beside him, holding him, sobbing. Their love, the love that destroyed me, was now their only comfort as death closed in. I watched them struggle, watched the light fade from their eyes, and I felt calm. Not joy, not sorrow.
Just calm.
When their bodies finally stilled, I blew out the candles one by one, plunging the hall into darkness. The silence was complete. I walked out into the night, the cold air filling my lungs. The stars above seemed sharper, brighter. It was done. Revenge had been served. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt free.